10 seconds, folks.
To add a little bit of humor, my brother just texted another movie quote. Good evening, everyone. Richard Copperthwaite for Northwest Access TV. Thanks for joining us for our election night coverage 2022. Polls closed about 1 hour ago in Vermont. But for starters, let me introduce, you've seen their names on the board already, Bridget Higdon, the managing editor for the St. Albans Messenger. Bridget, thanks for joining us again.
Sure.
This election, great to see you. And Jason Barney. Boy, Jason, where do I start? Longtime MDU teacher, author, former legislator, and finally, I usually have about 6 books on my bed. One of them is The Hidden History of Franklin County, Vermont, and great effort. Sounds like you've found something very beneficial to do in your spare time, if you have any of that. But good to have you back.
Thank you for the intro, and looking forward to taking a look at the election results with you.
Yeah, it should be an interesting night. I guess starting with, again, polls closed, so an obvious point. You may hear some opinions from us tonight. Obviously, nothing we're going to say is going to affect anything. The polls have closed. We're starting to get some very early results in. But a lot of changes. Boy, certainly a lot of changes statewide. Of the 6 constitutional offices in Vermont, only 2 incumbents running for re-election, Governor Phil Hoff and Auditor Doug Hoffer. So new faces in the other positions. Of course, Senator Patrick Leahy retiring. Congressman Peter Welch going after that seat. Right. Becca Balint, who seems poised to make history. Looks like Vermont way ahead in the polls. Looks like Becca Balint will be the first woman elected to Congress from Vermont. So a lot of changes at the statewide level. But boy, Bridget, I don't think, seems to me, no real suspense in any of the statewide elections unless I'm missing something. I thought maybe the lieutenant governor's race with David Zuckerman, Progressive Democrat, against Republican Joe Benning. I suspect that may end up being the closest statewide race, but boy, it sure seems like, aside from Republican Governor Phil Scott, seems like the Democrats are in pretty good shape for all the other offices.
Yes, I would say that's probably true.
Yeah. Jason, you buy that? You got any? And again, Joe Benning, I guess, talked to some of your kids at MVU.
So being a former state representative, it's always nice to be able to call a lot of local officials and some statewide officials.
Right.
And they do make the time to come to MVU and chat with the kids. Joe Benning was one, and despite Zuckerman's obvious name recognition, Benning came to MVU twice, spoke to 2 different classes, and I think he did very well with the students. So, but I would, as you stated earlier, I would expect the name recognition for Zuckerman is probably going to end that race pretty quickly.
Yeah, in Franklin County, we can definitely some new faces coming on. 13-member legislative delegation, and we've got a number of candidates not running again. So we'll definitely have some new faces. And you don't have no significant results at this point?
No, not at this point, but no, there's lots of new faces. It's great to see a lot of local women running for office in Franklin County. There's several candidates who are trying to, either bring a Democratic voice to the county or just sort of a new perspective, a new identity. And so I think that's great, and it's ambitious, and we'll see how it turns out tonight for sure.
Well, speaking of women, just having read in Boston Globe before we got here, interesting situation in the Bay State. Massachusetts will finally elect its first woman governor this time around, Maura Healey, the Attorney General. and all the candidates running for statewide office in Massachusetts are women, except for Secretary of State William Galvin.
Sure.
So definitely a good year for women in Massachusetts
Absolutely.
as well.
Yeah, and I mean, in the race for Franklin State Senate, we have 2 female candidates who
Right.
are sort of challenging the Republicans, and I believe Pam McCarthy is here to speak with us.
And in fact, are we ready to go for Pam McCarthy right now? Here she is. Hi, Pam. How you doing?
Hi, I'm doing well. It's been a long day and looking forward to seeing what the results are
I
tonight.
guess I'll start with, do you know more than we know? Have you got any numbers, any early numbers in the Senate race?
I just got home actually, and you probably have as much information as I do at this moment.
Interesting. So what, again, was this kind of a normal, you've run before, was this a quote normal campaign post-pandemic, or is nothing normal these days?
I would say nothing's normal, and I think it's been interesting having the early ballot as part of the mix this time, so that, as we were getting into this last month of campaigning, when usually we're fast and furious with canvassing, a lot of people had already voted, so it was really important to be able to get out there early on at events and at doors, and just having the opportunity to hopefully influence their opinion and their vote. So that piece has been different. I think today at the polls, I got to every single one of them and city and town twice. It was really interesting to kind of see the flow and how that was compared to 18. I mean, for me, it seemed like there were fewer people coming in the periods of time that I was at the various polls, maybe with the exception of the city. But again, I think that's been influenced by the fact that many people had already voted prior to today.
Interesting. Bridget, you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. Can you tell us about something new you learned about Franklin County during this campaign?
I'm sorry, Bridget, can you say it again?
Sure. Can you tell us something new you learned during this campaign?
I'm sorry, it's very garbled. Can you say it again?
Sure. Sure. Can you tell us something new that you learned during this campaign?
Something that I learned. Oh, I would say that going to doors with the House candidates has been an exceptionally good experience because we had a number of them this time who were all Zoom. It was an exceptional experience, going and basically doing 2-for-1 at the doors with the people who were speaking and realizing how much we all had in common. I think that as Democrats standing together, with a shared platform has been pretty good for all of us, and hopefully we'll see what the voters like.
Great.
Jason?
Hi, Pam. Jason Barney.
Hey, Jason.
I can remember what it was like to campaign, and I also remember the relief at the end of a campaign. Now that all of the polls are closed and the votes are being counted, is there anything else that you wish you could have done over the last several weeks or months that may have gotten you just a couple more votes or may have gotten you just a little bit more attention?
I think I wish that I could have knocked even more doors than I actually did, and that I've been able to spend more time in our new district's community of Richford. There is a lot going on up there and also in Albert, and I think that it's important that we reach every voter, in the time that we have. So I wish that I'd had more time to do that. I think that I was very fortunate to be able to have the donors and the supporters that I did this time, and to be able to do a number of mailings, some that were generated by me and some that were generated by Vermont Conservation Voters and the NEA and a couple of the other organizations that had endorsed me as a candidate. So those touches, I think, were very helpful in terms of the outreach that we were able to do. We'll see if it pays off in votes. Again, running against an incumbent senator and a House rep who's very, very well known for his time as a sheriff and also with his relationships here across Franklin County. It's a tough climb for sure, but I really felt it was important to put myself forward again, and especially in this time when women's issues and family issues are at the forefront in Vermont, that I really had something exceptional to offer, so I'm glad for that.
My sympathies on the door knocking. I can remember how fun that was and how naked sometimes a candidate feels being out there like that. I was wondering if you could offer a comment about your running mate, Nakuma, and what it was like to campaign with her.
Well, I was very excited that someone of her youth and perspective would throw her hat in the ring as early as she did. As soon as she heard that Corey Parent was not running through Neighbors for Safer St. Albans, she threw her hat in the ring, and I think, quickly realized that there's a lot of work involved. We did work together, and we had a good team around us, including the rest of the Franklin County Dems. Nakuma brings a lot of energy and perspective as a young mom, as a person of color, as someone who's in a, quote, mixed marriage with a Republican. So that's been very interesting to kind of see how her perspective is shaped. I think, again, to have young up-and-comers in the array of candidates that we had this year was really exciting for Franklin County and for the Democrats. So I'm hopeful that she will have found this a positive experience and that we can get her to run again no matter what the outcome is this time.
Pam, why is Franklin County, why is it such difficult political ground for Democrats? Indeed, your son Mike is, I guess I probably don't have to tell you, is the only Democrat in the 13-member local legislative delegation. Why so tough for Democrats around here?
That's hard to say. A lot of it has to do with more conservative perspective, and a number of the candidates in the Republican Party, again, are folks that have been here for a long time and are well known. And, again, we are trying to make the case that you don't have to have been born in Vermont to be an excellent candidate and representative for our communities. Again, I think it's a committee of which I'm vice chair, what exactly it would take to have more Democrats elected and to have some balance across the county and in Albert in the case of the Senate district. I think Mike's done an exceptional job. I'm hoping that he's going to be reelected as someone that has an in terms of the leadership of the House and has represented St. Albans and the rest of Franklin County very well as a Democrat. I'm also hopeful that those of us that chose to step up this time will have messages that really resonated for the voters and that they'll see that it's a good time to put some of us forward in this election.
So, Pam, as far as the outlook for the Senate for Democrats and Republicans, currently I believe the Democrats have about 2/3 of the seats in the Vermont Senate. Have you heard, or do you have any information about how any of the other results are going tonight?
Don't at the moment, honestly, Jay. Like I said, I just got back, and being that I'm the first one to program tonight, I haven't had a chance to really check everybody. I'm sure you're hearing throughout the night, and perhaps when you talk to Mike, who's at Hula with the gathering for the Dems there, some of the nitty-gritty about what's going on, not only for the Senate, but for the other races that are being looked at as front runners.
And then sort of a follow-up to that locally. Sometimes there are certain things on election night which become scarred based on the results. You ran before and lost. Do you remember which towns you heard from first in your previous attempt at the Senate? And who are you?
We were watching the Secretary of State's desk at the time, and also we're getting reports from our contacts where votes were being counted across the various towns. And I do remember being at Mike's house for a party at that time last time and getting that information and really being devastated, honestly, because I had high hopes at that point. And as a first-time candidate, I think, oftentimes the rule of thumb is you seldom win the first time around. We'll see what happens tonight. I think it's, one of those things where you are watching it from the minute that you get home, or if you're at a watch party, which in that case we were, you're just trying to gather that information, interpret it, and figure out what you're going to do with it, whether you're going to be elected or you're not.
Pam, the redistricting in the Franklin Senate District, still a 2-member district, but I'm thinking the redistricting didn't help Democratic candidates. Richford back in, Fairfax out, Fletcher out. I'm thinking that didn't help Democratic candidates.
I would say that's probably true. And I think we might talk about that a little bit when we last met through the referendum. We'll see how it plays out tonight. Again, I think losing Fletcher and Fairfax in particular, shift the numbers some, but I think we've really tried to focus on what we have to work with this time, and as I said, really getting out and knocking doors and talking to people and doing mailings and all of the other things that one has to do in order to make sure that the outreach is as solid as possible for those folks that continue to look at the candidate or might be persuaded to be back at the front end, they're considering someone else.
Any other questions? Bridget, anything else?
I would ask, I guess, no matter what happens tonight, you mentioned that women's issues and family issues are on the ballot. What would you sort of like to, I guess, at a local level, Franklin County-wise, what would you hope that whoever is elected for this evening moves forward immediately with those?
We'd like to see us really put a significant emphasis on childcare and on elder care. And to make sure that we finally get paid family and medical leave somehow, some way. I think it's critically important, having personally experienced that the last few years, and caring for my dad while I was working full-time running a statewide organization. For me, I had the privilege of being able to be home and still work and do all of those things. But many of the folks with whom I've interacted on the trail, and also when I was at Vermont Family Network as the CEO, don't have that luxury, and I think it's really important that we figure out better ways to make sure that people can earn a living and know that their loved ones, whether they're young or old, are getting high quality care that they can rely upon so that they can work with clear conscience and earn a living.
Yeah.
Hey Pam, thank you very much for joining us. We wish you good luck tonight. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Have a good evening, and we'll see you soon.
Okay, thanks. Pam McCarthy, one of the two Democratic candidates running in the Franklin Senate District. And again, I mentioned some redistricting. Senate District changed a bit. A couple of House districts changed also. And I want to mention, sometimes folks running unopposed kind of get lost in the shuffle, at least from me. Lynn Dickinson running unopposed in Franklin too. She'll get another term. And actually, Matthew Walker, we may be talking to Rep. Matthew Walker, Republican of Swanton, later on. He and Tom Oliver, Sheldon Republican, they're running unopposed in the Franklin 4 district. So again, a couple of these folks, and also Rep. Lisa Hango, Berkshire Republican, and Republican Wayne LaRush of Franklin, running unopposed in the Franklin 5 district. So some of these folks have nothing to worry about. And I should just mention for the record, again, just changes in the local legislative delegation. Carl Rosenquist, Rep. Carl Rosenquist, Republican of Georgia, retiring. Barbara Murphy, Independent of Fairfax. Felicia Loeffler, Republican of Enosburg, again, retiring. Robert Norris, Republican state rep from Sheldon, hoping to go from the House to the Senate. And Republican Senator Corey Parent, again, not running for re-election as well. And I guess I'd be remiss if I haven't mentioned the sheriff's race, a race that got a ton of attention for quite a while with, of course, the one name on the ballot, John Grissmore, and the highly publicized incident that resulted in a simple assault charge eventually being filed against Grissmore, but he's the one name on the ballot, ran as a Republican, won the primary, also won the Republican primary with write-in votes. Actually ran as a Republican, won the Democratic primary with write-in votes. But in the wake of the incident that I think a lot of people are familiar with, he was eventually fired from the Sheriff's Department. Franklin County Democratic and Republican committees got together, found another candidate, Mark Lauer, also working at the Sheriff's Department. And Lauer, a write-in candidate, and Gail Messier, former deputy sheriff in Chittenden County, whose twin brother Dale was a former Franklin County sheriff. So we have two write-in candidates. Bridget, I'll start with you. Write-in, I think everybody knows write-in candidacies are tough. Do you see a chance? Again, Mark Lauer certainly getting the most attention of the two write-in candidates. Has he got a shot today? Do you think he has a shot?
I think he
does. I think it might be a slim chance, but I think there's a possibility. I personally went to the poll in Fairfax today and met a woman outside who, her name was Kelly, and she was handing out little cards with Mark Lauer's name, trying to get people to vote for him. So there are people who are putting in the work and, trying to get him elected.
Interesting. Jason, your thoughts on the sheriff's race?
So it's something that I used in class. I gave my students a little bit of the backstory for what had occurred. And I have to say, I think the interview that you did with Grismore was great.
Feel free to beat me up.
It
Again,
provided.
he was the guy. He did most of the talking, obviously.
Yeah.
It was revealing. It was a very revealing interview, I'd say, about who he was
And part of it is what happened is on film. And as a former legislator and as a teacher who likes to talk to students about what the power of police should be, what happened is there for everybody to dissect and analyze. And one of the points that I made with my students is, personally, when the physical contact between the officer and the person being detained happens, I actually didn't have a problem with the first two thrusts or kicks or whatever you want to call them. My problem was the third one was probably over the line. So the question tonight becomes, are enough people going to be aware of that video or discussing that video to the point where write-in candidates can possibly knock off the only name that's on the ballot for the sheriff's position? I will publicly say that I did not vote for Grismore, and that incident was part of the reason that I didn't vote for him. But I don't know if I'm going to be the minority. He is the only name on the ballot. And it's difficult to run in to get a write-in campaign in those situations. So.
Yeah, for sure. Actually, one successful write-in campaign does come to mind. One of our assistant judges, side judges, Kelly Fitzgerald Goslin, I believe running for a fourth four-year term today. Her first term, she did win as a write-in candidate. I'm sure her father, the late, great Jim Fitzgerald, I think was very active, but she did pull off a write-in campaign then. But as we've said, it is tough. And again, the latest development, of course, there was a state police investigation into the incident, and Grismore was recently charged with simple assault, misdemeanor simple assault, the charge that he denied. And we were talking off air. I haven't done the background on this, but I'm sure if he's elected, and that certainly could be the case today, I'm sure a number of people are not going to be happy and will be wondering if they can do something to prevent him from becoming sheriff. Again, I haven't really looked into this, but I'm again, I'm just talking off the top of my head, but a simple assault, a misdemeanor conviction. Again, I guess I shouldn't be talking about it, but I wouldn't think that'd be enough to stop someone from serving. Any thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, there is precedent. In Addison County, the sheriff there, Peter Newton, was arraigned on 2 counts of sexual assault.
Some more serious, much more
right,
serious
and he
charges.
Still holds that seat
Yeah.
in Addison County. So,
and I guess those charges are still pending. They have not been resolved at this point. He's denied them, and I think they're still pending, I guess.
Right,
But yeah,
yes.
serious charges.
sure.
And he made
so
a point.
while he's going through the court process, I
Right.
mean, he's still holding that office.
Right.
And I
Was there
think,
much talk about in all your reporting, Bridget? Was that an issue that came up much? I suspect it did, especially around when the video came out. Did that kind of
Oh, absolutely,
fade
yeah,
as time
it's-
went on, or not too much?
No, I think it's still very much on people's minds, especially when we think about what happens to the sheriff's department if he is elected. Not necessarily what happens to him, but
Yeah.
what happens to that department and all of the towns that it
Yeah.
serves. Will Enosburg and Fairfax still keep their contracts with the sheriff's department?
Yeah.
I don't know. Time will tell, I think.
So if I can insert myself in
Sure.
the role of classroom teacher, and you guys as members of the press, your job is to report rather than give your opinions. But
Sure.
as a teacher, I give my opinion quite a bit. And I'll ask, what did you guys see? Is it close to my point of view where 1 and 2 kick thrust were actually okay and within the realm of what an officer needs to do, and 3 was over the line? Or did you guys see something different?
Bridget, you want to jump in?
I haven't heard specifically from any voters about that in particular. I do know quite a few people I mean, up in Swanton, we had a reporter who went there today who met a group of women who were disgusted and said they would shoot fireworks off if Mark Lauer won because they'd be so.
If Mark Lauer won, or
Correct. Yes, if Lauer won.
Really?
Right. So I think, yeah, you sort of have both sides. You have people who are uninformed on the issue and don't know and will just check off Grismore because he's there. And then I think you have folks who have been following the coverage and are passionate about it. And so what will sort of happen to those people in between, I don't know.
Hard for me to say too much. I couldn't be farther than being a law enforcement officer. And in my interview with Grismore, I think he made the point repeatedly, hey, being a cop is not an easy job. Physical force does come into play. So, I mean, I had a little more of a sense having a long interview with him. And he did acknowledge, I think it came up during the interview, that the video does look bad. Again, he said it was more of a thrust. He said it wasn't in the groin area. It kind of looked like it was. But, and anyway, so I had a little more sense. As I think I said off the air, as I think maybe I said during that interview, I was fully expecting Grismore to say something like, yep, I could have handled that situation better, but I've had a very good law enforcement career. Don't hang me on one incident. Of course, he didn't say that at all. He defended himself, said it was in self-defense and appropriate.
Yeah.
Anyway,
if
a little
my-
hard for me to go beyond that. But I mean, he acknowledged the video looks bad, and I've talked to a lot of people about that, and I've talked to a few people who said, no, I think I can see his point of view after having more context with that. But certainly, I can only assume most people who saw that video were not impressed. Again, look at the reaction. The two main political parties in Franklin County got together and found another candidate. I'm just maybe a little surprised, and again, I'm hardly on top of things, but I don't get the sense that they went all out to get, and again, we don't have numbers right now, but I don't get the sense that they went all out to have their main write-in candidate elected, but that comment's not worth much probably.
Yeah.
We have a few numbers
Yeah.
right now with a couple towns reporting, Sheldon, Highgate, and Berkshire. And we've got Grismore with a little over 1,100 votes, Mark Lauer with just about 800, and Gale with 58.
Interesting.
So
Some
Grismore is in the
numbers.
lead. I wouldn't
Yeah.
say dramatically so. And we also have many more towns still to come in, so.
Great,
Wait and
thanks
see.
for, feel free to throw out any numbers
Sure.
when you get them.
I will.
What were your students? Did you have any of the sheriff's candidates come and talk to the students?
I
Did you try to get Mr. Grismore, in fact?
I
Or anybody?
was that close to inviting him in, and I think I would have gotten maybe a little bit of heat, because is the classroom the appropriate place
Yeah.
to have that discussion? But I think I would have loved to have that individual come in and talk about what had happened. I have to say that the results that Bridget just mentioned, that would give some indication that even though he has a lead right now, you said that Lauer had 800 votes?
Yeah,
Yes.
the 300 vote difference with very early numbers.
So I would say that is a very successful write-in campaign, and I mean, we're waiting for a lot more towns, but
Yeah.
if Lauer has 800 votes now, then it'll be interesting to see how many other write-in votes he got
Sure.
for the rest of the evening.
Yeah, interesting. Hey, Jason, as we await our next interview, I guess, as a former candidate, I figured, as a former office holder, again, I'm watching especially some of the statewide races. Gerald Deploy Malloy, who I met at the Georgia Fall Fest, talked to him for a few minutes, and Brenda Siegel, just to pick those two folks out. Just saying, yeah, I'm very confident we're going to win. Do you think, and I guess my question, do you think they really think do you really think Gerald Malloy had convinced himself that he would or could beat Peter Welch, or is that something you just have to say as a candidate?
I think it's something that you have to say as a candidate. You're running a statewide race. You want to put on your best face until the polls are closed, until election night. But running against Phil Scott or running against Peter Welch, that is a tall order. And in their hearts, they probably knew it was going to be a long shot.
Pretty tough. I think we have Democratic Rep Mike McCarthy from St. Albans City ready to join us. Mike, are you there? Hey, Mike. Can you hear us?
And now.
Okay, great. Had, you may know, do you know, or have you been reelected, not reelected, do you know?
We have no results yet from the city precinct, so I unfortunately don't have any breaking news for you, but I've got my phone right here, and if somebody sends me a message, I'll let you know.
Interesting. And of course, here, if you get reelected, it'll be a little different House district for you with the redistricting. The new district that you're in happens to be my House district, wards 1 through 4 in St. Albans City. With
That's
the
right,
other,
with,
yeah.
the town and the city get 3 reps, and the boards of civil authority both recommended to the legislature that we have single seat districts. So that means that the city gets 1, and that's the district that I'm waiting for results on. Franklin 3, wards 1, 2, 3, and 4, the kind of northern 2/3 of the city. There's a shared district between the city and the town, that's Franklin 8, where Lauren Dees-Erickson and Casey 2 for the candidates, and then the rest of St. Albans town is Franklin 2.
Franklin 8, I'm struck by the numbers. You're in Franklin 3, the other neighboring district is Franklin 8. That seems a little strange to me.
Yeah, it's because of the, we tried to keep current districts with the current number, so Franklin 3 and Franklin 8 came out of Franklin 3-1. So we did our best to sort of make the new districts have the later numbers.
And you're happy with that redistricting? You think that was a good way to go?
Yeah, I initially wanted to make sure that if we were going to split the districts, that we didn't have 2 sets of political boundaries in the city. So we did a rather complicated thing where we redistricted the city council wards for the first time since the 1960s. And then we had the legislative district boundaries line up with the boundaries between wards 1 through 4 and wards 5 and 6. So if you're in ward 5 or ward 6, you know you're in legislative district 8 if you're in the city.
Is there anything for Rep. Mike McCarthy?
Yes, so you've obviously run for office before. Did you approach this campaign any differently than you have in the past?
Yeah, this campaign, I really focused on the work that we've done over the last couple of years in the legislature, in large part because I had the opportunity to serve in the House leadership team this year. This last biennium, so the last 2 years, I was the assistant majority leader, and that gave me a greater perspective and the chance to kind of help set the agenda. So I really focused on my experience and the leadership that I brought. And it was a really great campaign. I mean, I had great conversations with folks, and there were lots of opportunities during the last couple of years to help people navigate pandemic unemployment assistance. The Department of Labor had issues, and so there was a lot more constituent services work than I think most people had, and that gave me the opportunity to build really great relationships with a lot of people in the community. So I hope that is reflected in the vote when that comes out this evening.
Do you find that leaning on that experience is enough for constituents, or do they want to hear what you're going to do, what's going to be new or different this time around?
Yeah, I mean, I would say I coupled that focus on the experience with talking about the work that we have ongoing, and the priorities that we plan to roll out. I think the biggest thing that I heard from especially younger families, and there are tons of young families here in the city of St. Albans, was about the access and cost of childcare. And the Speaker, Majority Leader, and I have made it really clear with the passage of some initial legislation and the extra money that we put into the Child Care Financial Assistance Program that we're on track over the next couple of years to make it so that no family has to spend more than 10% of their income on child care. So child care, housing, and some of the work we're doing to make sure that we're ready for the climate change that's already upon us, and helping Vermonters, save money on their energy bills. Those are all things that are forward-looking and work that we haven't quite finished, but we've made some progress on.
Okay. Jason?
Hi, Mike. Jason Barney. Even though I was in the House 25 years ago, I was wondering if you could share with the viewers what it's like for a candidate to experience election day. I can remember being sick to my stomach. I can remember driving as fast as I could between Franklin and Highgate. I remember the tie I wore. I remember the car that I drove. What's it like, and where were you on Election Day today?
Yeah, so it was a little easier for me this time than it was in the Franklin 3-1, the former district that I'm sort of wrapping up my time with, because in that 2-seat district, I had to be at 2 polling locations. So sort of what you just described, the going back and forth and trying to make sure you saw voters at 2 places. Now that we've split the district into 2 singles, I'm just the city. So I got to hang out, except I took a 1-hour break to get some lunch and get out of the cold for a bit. But basically from just before the polls open until lunchtime, and then around 1 o'clock until they close just before 7, I was outside bundled up and hanging out with voters and my fellow candidates. And that tradition, I think, has it's remained, but I think it will change given that so many people voted early. I mean, now that we have universal vote by mail and the vast majority of folks are getting a ballot in the mail, you're only seeing, maybe a third to half of the voters voting in person on Election Day. And so, there's kind of this steady trickle of folks all day, but it wasn't the amount of people that you would see in years past. So that piece is a little bit different. But it's an endurance test, standing out there when the wind is blowing and it's a little crisp. We all, try to drink coffee and hot chocolate and stay warm, and it's a lot. But it was really fun to see people. I mean, there was a woman that when I knocked on her door probably 3 or 4 months ago, and met her for the first time. She's relatively new, moved here in the last couple of years, and she thanked me for sending her a postcard and a note after about our conversation and asked to take a picture of me. And she was like, "Is it okay if I post it on social media?" And I was like, "Yeah, I'd be thrilled if you would post this on social media, please." So there are fun moments like that all day. Peter Welch came up in the morning. Lieutenant Governor Molly Gray came in the afternoon and stood with us for a while. And the other thing that was fun about this particular election day is that my mom is running for state senate, and I got to hang out with my mom and my dad a little bit, so that was fun too.
So if I can ask sort of a politics inside baseball type question, you have a position of leadership in the Democratic Party. Question that's not really related to Vermont politics, but the president is 80 years old. Do you have any public comments about whether or not he should be running for re-election?
Yeah, I mean, I think that, in spite of some of the misinformation that's out there, the president seems to be in pretty good health. And I think what we really need as a country right now is stability and some ballast against some of the turmoil that's gone on. I'm not sure if President Biden is going to be able to provide that stability. What I think we'll know after tonight is who's in control of the Senate, who's in control of the House, and can we move an agenda forward as National Democratic Party that is going to help working families, get us out of some of the rising costs that we're seeing right now with inflation. And I worry that if the Democrats win the Senate and the Republicans take the House, that we'll end up basically having a stalled agenda, and everyone will be very frustrated with the president, regardless of what he may want to accomplish or how capable he would be in another situation. I think that this midterm, unfortunately, could just result in 2 years of us kind of stagnating on some of the policy. One of those things that would affect us very much here is that part of the original Build Back Better bill would have provided a lot of subsidy for childcare. It would have helped us get a long, long way to where we want to go with federal dollars, and that will be much harder for Vermont to do on our own. So I think our path to true childcare affordability would be made a lot easier if President Biden has a Congress that can actually deliver on that childcare package.
And then one more follow-up as far as your position in Democratic leadership. Do you feel like your position in Democratic leadership opens you up to criticism that a regular candidate for House wouldn't have to deal with?
I think it made me a target. There was a little bit of an implication during this campaign that because I'm in leadership that I'm somehow more beholden to the Democratic Party, and I'd flip that on its head and say I actually have the ability to shape what the Democratic House Caucus is doing, and I'm also directly in the negotiations with the minority party leadership, especially my Republican colleagues. And in Vermont, we're in a position now, I was telling people this today, I'm friends with the minority leader. I went and had dinner at the home of the minority whip, Rob LeClaire, Patty McCoy, the minority leader, the leader for the Republicans. She jumped up on stage when my band was playing in Montpelier and was dancing and singing with me. So there's a camaraderie that happens that sort of crosses the party lines. And when you get down in Montpelier and you're working on committee with people from other parties, I'm sure you know this, we respect that committee process and make sure every voice gets heard. And while, I have my values and want to represent, my constituents and put the party kind of the third or fourth on the list, being in the position that I'm in helps me set the agenda. So the biggest thing I think is that it's made me a bit of a target. And what I saw the Vermont GOP chair, Paul Dame, was quoted in Vermont Digger this summer saying, my opponent was going to give me the race of my life. And I think they fundraised pretty heavily off of that. So, you saw a lot of spending in my race. I think I probably got outspent about 3 or 4 to 1. In terms of dollars, but what I do is get out there and knock on doors and talk to people, and I think we ran a great campaign with a mixture of that, kind of shoe leather, knocking on doors and making phone calls, along with a targeted mail strategy where we kind of got the message out about what have I done, what's my record, and what are we going to do, and I felt like I got a great response. So. It certainly didn't feel like things were going badly at the doors. It'll be very interesting for me to see what these results are. And I have a feeling one of the reasons that we're waiting so long for the results is that with all of the write-ins in the sheriff's race, I had heard from a couple of our JPs and the city clerk that a number of the ballots were rejected from the tabulator. So I have a feeling that the folks that are in there doing the counting want to make sure that they see not just the tabulated results, but they can add the results from those ballots that couldn't be read automatically by the tabulator because they had the write-in or they were marked in such a way that the tabulator kicked them out.
All right, Mike, we'll let you go. Thank you for putting yourself out there, and good luck tonight.
Thanks so much
Thanks,
for
Mike.
having me. Have a good night.
Thank you.
I certainly thought that race would be a competitive race. Again, Mike being challenged by St. Albans City Republican Joe Luno. So we'll see what the numbers. Josh, we're set to go for Ashley Bartley. And we have one of the 4 candidates running in the 2-member, again, the redistricted Fairfax and most of Georgia House District. And Ashley Bartley, a Republican of Fairfax, I believe, about to join us. Hi, Ashley. How you doing? It sounds like you can hear me. We can't hear you right now.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, good. Yep. I think we're okay. Looks like
Hi,
you've.
Richard. How are you?
Anyway, hey, have you got any results for us from your House race?
We do. I just spoke to Carolyn, and we have unofficial numbers. But I'm happy to announce that both Carolyn and I will be going to Montpelier in January.
Wow, that's big news. You're ahead of us. Congratulations. I've got a good friend who's a bit of a Republican operative who seems to have a pretty good handle. I talked to your race with him the other day, and he predicted you and Carolyn would win the 2 seats. So again, these are unofficial results you're telling us?
Yep, they're unofficial. Unfortunately, I don't have the numbers on me right now. But Carolyn came in around 200 or 2,200. I came in at about 2,000. And we're really excited. But like I said, they're unofficial votes, numbers.
Okay, I should note the 2 Democrats in the race, Al Maynard of Fairfax and the Reverend Devin Thomas of Georgia. And it was kind of an interesting district. It was redistricted, and the 2 incumbents, Georgia Republican Rep Carl Rosenquist and Fairfax Independent Barbara Murphy, did not seek re-election, so it opened up a couple of seats. And I also should note that with the redistricting, Georgia, I guess about 900 voters in Georgia got tossed into the mostly Milton 2-member House district.
Yeah, about, like you said, 900 voters were kind of tossed in that new mix. I think it kind of led, none of us really knew what to expect. We knew it was going to be a strange year, but it's looking really good for Republicans in Franklin County.
So what was the key? Again, you're, I believe, a first-time candidate. What was the key to your winning and your and Carolyn's winning?
Yeah, we have a family saying, you got to leave it on the field. We had to end at 7:01 tonight, knowing that we worked the hardest and that there was nothing else we could have done. And I think that really showed. We were out there every morning at 6:30. This morning I was out there at the polls from 6:30 to 7 when they closed. And you got to work hard. And I couldn't, and I speak for both Carolyn and I, we have such a strong team. She's someone who's been in the legislature. I'm younger. We just work so well together, and that I think really is what got us through the finish line.
Interesting. Bridget, you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. I mean, do you want to tell us who's with you there?
Yeah, so this little Reagan Rose Bartley. She is definitely past her bedtime. But yeah.
Yeah, great. So I would say, from my point of view, you seem to bring sort of a new perspective in your campaign in terms of being a young woman, being a mother, being a Republican who's sort of new to town, I believe, if that's correct, at least in recent years. So will you talk a little bit about that perspective and how you sort of packaged it for constituents?
Yeah, I think, it's, I was talking to my husband earlier this week. We came from Chittenden County, and Franklin County really resonates with both of us. I come from a long line of dairy farmers. At the end of the day, we all want what's best. What's best for our families, for our little ones, for our aging mothers and grandmothers and grandfathers, and I took that, and that was going to be important in the race. It was important to me, and at the end of the day, I stayed true to the values of my family, and I think that resonates with other people in the town.
Yeah, great. And I believe you're with some other Franklin County Republicans. Is that correct? Can you tell us sort of what the atmosphere is like there?
Yeah, so we're at 14 Star. We're all really hopeful. Like I said, I think we all, going into today, were, positively or cautiously, but like I said, we all on the field, we all worked really hard, had really competitive races, and now some of us, like myself, kind of have a moment to take a step back and have a sigh of relief. While all of others of us are waiting for those numbers to come in, but it's very joyful, and we're celebrating a good night.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, Ashley.
Jason?
Thank you, Bridget.
Hi, Ashley. Jason Barney. So 25 years ago, I was the Republican state representative from Franklin and Highgate. Congratulations. But because I'm a former Republican, I feel confident challenging members of the party who are reaching out. I was wondering if you could offer a comment about former President Trump's election denialism and the results of the 2020 election.
Yeah.
Do you agree with the former president, or do you have a problem with what he's doing?
I am a believer that when the election ended on the day that the results, not anything and that, but I believe it was a fair election, and I think it's time to move on and focus on what the effective both state and Americans and the.
Ashley, we're having a bit of a problem. You're kind of breaking up on us here.
Oh, I'm sorry. No.
Well, it looks like you have your hands full. Looks like you're, anyway. Hey, thank you for joining again. Congratulations again, unofficially. Looks like yourself and former legislator and soon-to-be future legislator Carolyn Brannigan have won the 2 seats in the Franklin 1 district. Thank you for joining us. Congratulations. Good luck in Montpelier.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Great, congrats.
Thanks. Boy, again here, again Republicans. That's basically well, it's not really a pickup. Again, the 2 incumbents in the former district there, Republican Carl Rosenquist and Independent Barbara Murphy. But again, kind of a drag. Jason, again, you've been down there, but feel a little bad for the roughly 900 residents of Georgia who got tossed into the mostly Milton 2-member House district. Good luck for any of those 900 folks to ever get elected to the legislature. That would seem to be a pretty tall order.
Yeah. Redistricting is something that happens every 10 years.
Yeah.
It is something that has to be done based on the population of the state and population of the individual districts. When I left the legislature, the districts changed. I used to represent the Franklin and Highgate district, and then Berkshire and Richford were added for 2 members. So sometimes it works out for good representation, and then other times it's difficult. I think there was a push this year, and I know several of the people during your interviews mentioned that they wanted to try to have as many 1-seat districts as possible.
In fact, I think the committee, there was a 4-3 vote on with the official redistricting committee, whatever they called it.
Yeah.
I think that 4-3 vote was, I think they wanted all single-member districts.
And I think
And
two of
obviously didn't pull that off, but made some progress, I guess, towards that.
and I think Franklin County has 2 of the 2-member districts that are left. The one up on the Canadian border that I used to represent, and the district that we just talked about.
Interesting.
Sure, yes, those 900 Georgia voters, their representatives will most likely be Chris Taylor and Chris Mattos.
Of course, Meadows.
Of Milton, Chris Mattos is an incumbent, and Chris Taylor is a select board member in Milton, who's running for the first time to replace John Palczewski.
Yeah, thanks, Bridget. Because it was mostly out of Franklin County, I didn't deal with that in my interviews, but you just made me think of a possibility for the Republicans to pick up a Senate seat of all things in the new Chittenden North District.
Yes.
And
Very
that
interesting.
includes Fairfax, Milton being the main town, Westford, and part of Essex.
Part of Essex.
And Representative Leland Morgan, current Republican state rep from Grand Isle County, West Milton, is a Republican candidate. Irene Renner, I believe, Essex Democrat,
Yes.
the Democratic candidate. Did I see a messenger story? Did you guys get into that?
We did, yes. It's a very interesting race.
And again,
I
a
really don't
single-member
know how
district.
it'll go, yeah. I think Irene has put in a lot of effort. She's been all over that district at a lot of events, put in a lot of time, showed up to every forum that was occurring for that race. Leland didn't show up to any, but it has sort of that name recognition. But I also think Irene does in a way. She's been involved in Essex for a long, long time.
Is she an Essex Select Board member?
Yes,
I think.
right,
Yeah.
former select board member. And then just has been an activist there for a long time in their sort of separation merger campaigns. So I think it'll be really, really interesting to see. And yeah, whether there will pick up a Republican seat or whether it'll go Democratic, I don't know.
Finally, one of the main issues with the redistricting folks was the insane 6-member, soon-to-be former 6-member Chittenden Senate District, the biggest legislative district, most numbers in the country. Unbelievable. So they finally broke that up to some extent. So redistricting, just one of those things. Every 10 years you deal with it, I guess.
And the Chittenden County Senate districts were always something that was a frustration, not just to people in Franklin County, but I think a good portion of the state. If I recall, I don't think there were any other Senate districts that had 3. I think maybe Rutland was a little larger, but almost all of the other,
nobody had more than 3. Yeah,
almost all of the other counties had 2 or 1.
Right.
So the fact that they are breaking it up, I think, is progress for that the rest of the state can agree on.
Right. I guess no change in the Grand Isle County, Colchester. Dick Mazza, the longtime state senator from Colchester, who I guess he has a Republican opponent someone who I'm sure is not going to fare well. Dick Mazza, one of the
Right.
most popular legislators, but I guess that district, didn't change at all. Anyway, yeah. What else was I going to get into here? Bridget, any numbers jumping out at you there? Anything worth reporting at this point? Again, thanks for the early sheriff's race numbers. Anything? I
Sure.
did see some numbers from
couple
what
in,
Franklin. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, in Franklin 6, so in Bakersfield,
Yeah.
Fairfield, Fletcher.
Yeah.
Fairfield is reporting so far,
Yeah.
with Gregor in the lead there with 550, and Churchill with 311.
Boy, and that's from Bakersfield.
That's from Fairfield.
I'm sorry. That's from
So,
Fairfield.
I want to say that probably secures Gregor's re-election there. Time will tell, of course,
I
but
would think so. Brenda
think it's
Churchill, I
close.
guess, very involved in Bakersfield on the Bakersfield Select Board.
yes,
But that's still, boy, that's a lot of numbers to pick up from the smaller of the two towns.
right.
It would seem to be very safe to say Mr. Gregoire is in pretty good shape for re-election there.
Yes, I think so.
And again, we haven't really talked about state senate at all. We're talking a four-way race. Again, incumbent Senator Randy Brock from Swanton. Well, of course, we talked about Pam McCarthy, but the other Republican, again, Bob Norris, a state rep from Sheldon, trying to move from the House to the Senate. Pam McCarthy, who we talked to, one of the Democratic candidates, and Nakuma Palczewski, the other Democratic candidate in the somewhat redistricted still two-member Franklin Senate District. Also, just some of the other races out there. The probate court judge race, I think very interesting race. You have the incumbent probate court judge Vaughn Como running as a Democrat, his challenger Bob Farrar running as a Republican, and that's a rematch from 4 years ago. And interesting, they both ran as Democrats 4 years ago, with Bob Farrar, a St. Albans city councilor these days, actually winning the Democratic primary, but Como got to live for another day by winning enough Republican write-in votes to take the election to November when he won a close election. So we have a rematch there. Any thoughts on the probate court judge? I guess I was figuring another probably fairly close race.
I don't know. We've seen in the messenger. We've seen sort of mostly letters written in support of Bob Farrar.
Yeah, of course, who's the St. Albans guy, of course.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, there's been a few for Vaughn, but
Yeah.
yeah, that one I don't know, and I don't know a lot about, honestly. So
Yeah.
I think it'll be surely interesting to see.
And again, other county-wide races, a state's attorney's race. Again, we talked about all the changes at the statewide level, some of the local delegation, and also Franklin County State's Attorney Jim Hughes, a longtime state's attorney here in Franklin County, actually recently stepped down to give his chief deputy, John Lavoie, the chance to be the state's attorney. And of course, Lavoie now running for a 4-year term, a St. Albans City Democrat, and being opposed by Milton Republican Zach Waite. And just before I'll break, just mention also the race in the county for assistant or side judge, incumbent Kelly Goslin, Jay Sweeney, and Josh Aldrich are the three candidates. So we're going to take a short break. We will be back with more returns. Thanks for watching us here on Northwest Access TV. We will return. And good evening again, everyone. Richard Copperthwaite for Northwest Access TV. We're dealing with election night 2022 and very happy to have alongside two folks who know what's going on around here. Bridget Higdon, the managing editor of the St. Albans Messenger. Bridget, great to have you on board. And Jason Barney, history, that is your subject, history or political science or what at MVU, Jason?
Yeah, history. I wouldn't want to try to teach math or English.
History is good. You're doing a fine job, I think, with history.
My compliments to those teachers who do that.
But a history teacher, author, and a former legislator. Bridget, I guess we talked about it. We can clearly nail down the House race in Franklin 6. That's Fairfield, Bakersfield, and Fletcher. We're still lacking Bakersfield votes, but James Gregoire, the incumbent Republican, I guess 901 votes to Brenda Churchill, the Bakersfield Democrat, 629. And a miracle's not going to, again, Churchill might end up winning Bakersfield anyway.
Bakersfield is her hometown, so.
Yeah, oh yeah, no, she may come out of Bakersfield in good shape, but certainly not enough to turn that around. So James Gregoire will be reelected from Franklin 6. And again, we had the interview just a little while ago with Ashley Bartley, the Fairfax Republican, who reports unofficially that she and her colleague Carolyn Brannigan, a former and apparently future legislator, the two Republican candidates in Franklin 1, now a two-member district, Fairfax and most of Georgia. She reports that they're victorious, defeating Fairfax Democrat Al Maynard and Georgia Democrat, the Reverend Devin Thomas. So some results coming in, and we've got an interview coming right up with House candidate in the St. Albans in Franklin 8. Now, Lauren Dees-Erickson joining us, the Democratic candidate. And Lauren, how you doing? Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Doing well. How are you doing?
Yeah, we're doing okay. Can you tell us something we don't know? Probably a lot of things you could tell us that we don't know, but do you know the result of your race?
Not yet. We have some unofficial results from the town, but nothing official from either place. So I think that we're definitely sitting on pins and needles, waiting for the details like everyone else.
And again, you're trying to unseat a Republican State Rep Casey Toof. Again, I would assume you would have considered yourself the underdog in this race, or am I wrong?
Yeah, no, I think in our interview together with Casey, I definitely consider myself an underdog. I mean, ultimately, it is a new district. Franklin 8 is a new district, but he is a sitting representative. So our campaign has run an amazing campaign. We've done everything that we can. We've gone out to every door. We have sent out mailers. We've tried to really talk to as many folks as possible. And, that's all we can do, really. So, yeah.
So this was your first race? This was your first race? So how's it been? I know you've worked hard, but how has the experience been for you?
Oh, it's been an amazing experience. I mean, I think that I have felt so lucky to meet so many people. I've felt really privileged to hear so many opinions. And yeah, I mean, it's been a really good, tiring, but good experience. So it's been wonderful.
Bridget, you want to jump in?
Yeah, sure. I thought we'd talk a little bit about maybe about voter turnout. In the past, voter turnout has sort of historically been lower in the city than it has been in the town. With in 2020, 56% of St. Albans city voters turned out versus 77% of town voters, which is kind of a big difference there. And I was wondering if that was something you thought about while you were campaigning, or sort of what you would hope would change in the future about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a really good question. I think my hope has always been, in every conversation I have with people who live in Franklin 8, is just to really remind them that their vote counts. And so that still stands. I always hope people show up and come out and vote because their vote matters.
Great. Do you have any suspicions about why that sort of difference exists at all between the city and the town?
I mean, I think ultimately people turn out because they feel like their voice is heard, and I think sometimes people don't turn up because they feel like what they're saying isn't being listened to. So I'm hoping this time around, I mean, I think that both of us were really, both candidates were really pushed to be a little more, my opponent really needed to be more responsive, and I have been out there listening, and so my hope is that people saw that change, saw what we were doing, and hopefully that led more people to turn out. I'm hopeful.
Yeah, great.
Jason?
Lauren, Jason Barney, pleased to meet you.
Hi, nice to meet you.
So you got into this running against an incumbent, somebody who's had that seat for at least a couple of terms. Do you want to offer a comment about what it's like to go up against somebody who is already in the legislature and you giving your first roll of the dice at it?
Yeah, so Casey is definitely the incumbent for Franklin 3-1. It was a great opportunity with redistricting in Franklin East to throw my hat in the ring. I think that no seat is guaranteed for anyone. And I think that it's really important for people in positions of power never to sit back and get too comfortable. We're here because people put us here. And so I think that's a wonderful opportunity for everybody to listen and talk to as many community members as possible. And that's really kind of the motto I took, which is it's about the people. It's not about me, it's about the people. It's about elevating the people's voices. And it's about making sure that, what people want is clear. And so anytime someone wants to run for office, I would recommend it. I mean, it's a great opportunity to meet a lot of people and to really have your finger on the pulse of what's going on in your city or town.
So when you first joined the interview, did you mention that you thought that you had some unofficial results? Is that anything you can share?
Yeah,
or?
I mean, I probably shouldn't say anything. I mean, I think that they will release official results, and all of us will be pleasantly surprised by the outcome. But I don't think we have any idea right now. I think there was a lot of write-in votes because of the sheriff's race, and so it'll be interesting to see all of the results for Franklin 8 and Franklin County as a whole.
And how did you spend Election Day?
At the polls. So I was at the polls starting at 6:30. I was putting out signs, and then I was outside in the cold weather all day long between Pearlie and City Hall in St. Albans City. So I was out there, I was holding signs, I was talking to folks. We even had some 7th and 8th graders from city school come out for their social studies class. They were asking us questions, and it was a really, really great ending to the campaign.
I'm going to make a note of that. I should actually have my classes go out to the polls.
Was there one dominant issue, Lauren, during the campaign?
Oh gosh, I mean, I think there were a couple, and I think that I repeated them over and over. Affordable housing has been on everybody's mind. The cost of living, a lot of times I went to door and talked to seniors, and they mentioned, being on fixed incomes and having to make hard decisions between fixing up their homes, paying for the high cost of medicine and, taxes. The issue of schools, we're asking a lot from our teachers. And so as a result, it's really on us to make sure that we protect their pensions and we make sure that school funding is strong and also being utilized efficiently. So those are just a couple of the issues that I heard about. And obviously Article 22, all of those issues are at the forefront of many community members' minds.
Lauren, we're getting partial numbers now in your district. Not looking so good for you. We're getting numbers from KC2 with 675 votes, yourself with 389. And I guess is that the city part or the town part? One of the two. That would seem to be pretty tough numbers to make up in the other part of the in the district. But if indeed you do, if you're defeated, would you still consider this a positive, good experience, or?
Yeah, I mean, I think those are the town numbers. I think we're still waiting for the city numbers. But I went into this race recognizing that I was up against someone with a lot more name recognition. I recognized that this was my first race ever, and it didn't deter me because I knew that it doesn't matter. Ultimately, democracy is all about putting yourself out there. I knew that there were issues that weren't being addressed that I wanted to elevate, and I feel very happy that some of those issues have been adopted by my opponent, in particular his new support of Article 22. I take that as a win. I think that body autonomy and reproductive rights are very important, and so I'm very, very happy that I ran, and I'm looking forward to getting the city results as well.
And it sounds like, I know you've been very involved in local affairs. You'll keep that involvement going, I suspect.
Yeah, that's not going to change. I'm still the vice chair of the Planning Commission. I still sit on the board of United Way. I'm still very actively involved in my children's school here in the city. So I'm not going anywhere. I'll still be around.
Hey, well, thank you for joining us, and I know you worked hard. Congratulations on running a very solid campaign, giving voters a good choice.
Thank you so much. Thanks for having me, and have a good night.
Yes,
Great.
thanks, Lauren.
Thank you.
Good night.
Okay, that certainly sounds like another House race we can nail down.
Let's not be so quick.
Is that
Yeah,
right? You wouldn't be so quick?
I don't know. I think she has a big crew. She's got a lot of support. I think the city, we know the city has voted Democrat in the past. So I think let's see.
I'm sorry. No, I'm not saying anything for sure. I'm just saying it certainly
Yeah, I'm
doesn't.
curious.
It
I'm
certainly
interested
doesn't
to
look
see
too
what's going on
good.
here.
But no, I know she worked hard. I give her a lot of credit. I was very impressed with her candidacy. I think it was too. In fact, in general, easy for me. I mean, I interviewed most of these folks, Jason. And again, you've been the candidate, you've been the office holder, but I've been actually pretty impressed. You know, I would never sit here and by name beat up on someone who I would, but boy, just about everybody I talked with, I was pretty impressed. And, you know, I've covered stuff for, decades around here. It never crossed my mind to run for something. You've been there, but I'm impressed. Sure. And you talked about that, I think, a little bit before, but
Yeah.
doesn't strike as something I can't imagine doing.
And we won't have the results from the other part of her district, but she seemed to think that she was going to have some good numbers from what is left out there. The other thing I'll say is to your point. When I was in the legislature, it was much easier running. I cannot imagine running a campaign today in the age of social media.
Yeah, really.
I mentioned it with Mike and Pam and Ashley. When you put your name out there, you do feel naked, and there are people who are very passionate about their views one way or the other, and some of them can be relentless in trying to make a point. And social media is a place where people can pretty much say anything they want, and sometimes it's to make a point, and sometimes it's to either get into a candidate's head or to cut them down. So I never had to deal with that, but my compliments to the Ds, the Rs, and the progressives who have, the independents, libertarians, who have put their names on the ballot, because it is not easy.
Yeah, I hear you. Bridget, in general, I mean, you interviewed a lot of folks. You
did,
reasonably impressed with most of the candidates?
Yes, I was reasonably impressed with most of the candidates. There were, there was one in particular who chose not to speak to the messenger, and I think that's telling about how comfortable they feel in their district and their ability to win. And I think, where am I trying to go with this? I was impressed with everybody for putting themselves out there, for answering tough questions, and I think you have to work for it. I do, and I think a lot of these people did, which is really great.
To follow up on that,
Yeah.
in the Franklin County Senate race, I know Randy Brock and Norris and the McCarthy name are out there. But as the results come in, a candidate that I think everybody should at least be aware of is Nakuma, if I can pronounce her.
Palczewski, I think I'm pretty close to Palczewski, who I interviewed. Yeah, impressive, came across very well. Tough, certainly a tough race as a kind of the newcomer here.
When she came to MVU and talked with the social studies classes, she was very impressive. She by far is the youngest candidate in that race. I think she's 34 years old. And, you know, you're talking to teenagers, and she just did really, really well. She reached out to the students, and I think she went into the race knowing it was going to be pretty tough, going against an established senator and a name like Norris and somebody like McCarthy who's had her name out there. But she's an impressive candidate, and I wouldn't be surprised if she remains involved in Franklin County politics.
Right. And in the sheriff's race, I think we have 9 of 15 towns reporting now. And so we can say that Mark Lauer's write-in campaign was successful in 2 of those towns, in Sheldon and in Franklin. So the margin overall at this time, Grismore leads by about 500 votes. And of course, there are still 6 towns to come in.
To be honest, I'm confused by what I'm seeing on the screen. I'm confused by these numbers. Total write-in counts? Does that mean anything to you guys? You see what's in front of us? What's that?
Not separated by candidate. Write-in.
Yeah. So I think we can go by the numbers that we have for the towns, and to sort of emphasize Bridget's point and what we were talking about earlier, and even off screen too. Just a write-in campaign is so tough,
Really?
especially when you're talking about so many towns. And for Lauer, and I understand Lauer was the only interview that, the only person in that race who...
No, I tried to interview who I didn't come.
But to have Lauer even ahead or winning Franklin, and is the other one Sheldon?
Yes.
That's impressive, and that shows that at least a good portion of the people who vote in Franklin County did not like what they saw in that video.
No, I think it's entirely safe to say, I mean, a big majority of people who saw the video didn't like what they say, but didn't like what they saw. But again, we're back to one name on the ballot, and again, I'd love to have a better feel for how hard the pro-Lauer forces worked for this, but they obviously did some work. But again, that's, I guess, hard to say. Did you have an interview with Mark Lauer?
Yes, one of my colleagues did.
Yeah, I think it's
Yes.
probably a sign. Interesting.
Yeah.
And of course, and again, kind of the second write-in candidate, we haven't talked much about Gail Messier, which probably wasn't the best news for the pro-Lauer forces to have a second write-in candidate jump in. Anyway, Franklin County Senate numbers, Bridget, have you got some Senate numbers?
Sure, yeah, we can look at that. So let's see. So we have, yes, Brock and Norris, both in the lead with over 2,000 votes each. And Pam and Nakuma Palczewski trail quite significantly, I would say. Pam with just over 1,200 votes. And Nakuma with about 600.
Okay, so again, more numbers to go, but I certainly considered incumbent Senator Brock and Rep. Norris pretty heavy favorites in that race, but some more numbers to go.
Sure.
And we've got a Republican Rep. Matthew Walker from Swanton joining us right now. Rep. Walker, how you doing? Can you hear me? Hello? Looks like we're having some issues here.
Good evening.
Oh,
There we
okay,
go.
great. We can hear you. Hopefully you can hear. So it sounds like you probably weren't sweating this election too much.
I was very fortunate. My running mate and I were very fortunate to be unopposed in the Swan Sheldon. So yes, for my first election, I was very fortunate to to not sweat this one.
And again, your colleague in your district, Swanton Sheldon 2 member Tom Oliver, Republican from Sheldon, you being a Republican from Swanton, running unopposed.
Yes, I was fortunate enough to be appointed by Governor Scott back in February to fill out Brian Savage's spot, and I pretty much committed to the governor that I would run at least one cycle, and so I was very fortunate to be unopposed and to meet Tom to fill into Representative Norris's spot, who we hope that Representative Norris has a big night here in his Senate campaign, and everybody that I'm actually at Representative Norris's house with most of the rest of the Republicans in the area, and we're all waiting patiently to see results. Unfortunately, Swanton is having a hard time with their new tabulator. They're a little slow, and it's going to be another hour or more before we hear from Swanton, but I'd like to hear the official results, and as would everybody, and kind of excited to see our local news coverage here and catch up on where we're at with everything else.
Given the fact you had no opposition, how hard did you campaign? You didn't have to campaign at all? I assume you did some campaigning?
Well, I certainly joined the sine waves for a number of our fellow colleagues, Republican colleagues, and no, I didn't. I would say I did not actively campaign significantly. I answered a huge amount of questionnaires and pieces, and trying to get our business in a good spot to be able to transition to be gone from January 4th, and. So we do own a local shop in St. Albans, and my wife will have a lot of extra responsibility come January 4th, so we've been preparing and hiring and meeting and getting ready.
Bridget, want to jump in?
Yes. Hi, Matt. How are you?
Good evening. Good.
Good. So you've had almost a full year in the legislature now, a little less. We spoke back in February when you were appointed. Can you talk a little bit about the learning curve that you've had the past couple of months and what that took from you?
Well, yes, and I appreciate that back at the time. I had, as with many people, being a novice, no idea exactly how things ran in Montpelier, and I'd say I still have an awful lot more to learn. It is amazing how many issues face Vermont, and obviously with the amount of 13 committees in the House, and I'm fortunate enough to be on transportation, which is pretty critical to for projects coming on with 78, the issues coming off the interstate with the backup, with the sidewalk to MVU. I'm hoping that when I get back that I'll still be able to hold a spot on the committee because it's pretty critical to all the projects going on in Sheldon. But the state is quite something. And I'm glad I had that 3 months to kind of get a feel for it, forward to attending actually the orientation and being able to do a better job serving Sheldon but it is a pretty amazing place, awful lot going on, and I can understand what it takes. People say that full term to learn how things work down there, and I certainly feel that way.
Okay, great. Swanton has certainly seen some growth in the past couple of years, especially in its downtown, starting to see some new businesses and some great revitalization. What sort of economic development would you like to see in your district in the coming years?
Well, that's a big issue all across the whole state. I think that Swanton has leadership, the big change with the village manager retiring. That's a big new opportunity, and they're getting close to it. And the development manager with Nance in the position, and a lot of on there. I really like the conversation about a new rest area, potentially to capture maybe in pull it back up again. A rest area kind of on the priority for capturing that traffic before it gets too far south to come back to Swanton, Sheldon, and taking that turn into Highgate, Sheldon, headed towards JP. So I hear a lot of pieces, as I said, a lot going on the transportation side that can help that development. The rest area being improved, heading over to New York, and I hope to be able to continue on that committee. That's especially with the traffic north coming.
Great. Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Matt. We appreciate you joining us this evening, and congratulations to you.
Thanks, Matt.
Have a great evening. Thanks for having me. Take care.
Thank you very much. We have another candidate. We have one of the Democratic State Senate candidates, Nakuma Palczewski of St. Albans, joining us right now. Nakuma?
In the meantime there, it looks like we've got some results from Enosburg.
Oh,
which we can
great.
take a look at.
Okay.
So in the sheriff race, we have Grismore winning Enosburg. And then in their Franklin 7 representative district, which is a one seat, we had 3 candidates, Alan Demar, Suzanne Hull-Cassavant, and Cindy Weed. In Enosburg, we have Alan Demar winning so far, but there are, of course, other towns to report there, Montgomery as well.
Just Montgomery, but Enosburg's a biggie, obviously, the much bigger
It is.
town than Montgomery.
So that would be another Republican.
And Alan Penny DeMar, how many votes? You got the votes from Enosburg?
Yes, 657
Yeah.
to Cindy Weed's 314, and Susie Cassavant's 97.
Wow, interesting. Montgomery's not about to turn that around. I've known Alan Penny DeMar since about day one up here. I thought, again, they're case 3, I thought very solid candidates right there.
Yeah.
Cindy Weed, of course.
It'll depend on how strong turnout is in Montgomery.
It's a much
you know.
smaller town, Bridget. There's
Yeah.
no way that's. I mean, Cindy, I suspect, will win Montgomery possibly, but
Right.
yeah, that's not about to change. So, wow, and it was interesting. Penny DeMar jumped into that. As you may recall, that was the one primary contest in Franklin County.
Yes, it was.
Zachariah Messier was his opponent. Penny won about, I think, 90% of the vote.
He did.
But I
It was
think he
pretty
just
much a
jumped in
landslide.
right before the primary, and it sure looks like he's on his way to Montpelier. Any luck with Nakuma? Okay, Nakuma, I think we have you. Greetings, Richard Copperthwaite here. How you doing? Good to see you. It sounds like you're probably not going to win this race, but I suspect you were the underdog. But has it been a good experience running for the Senate?
Well, it's been a wonderful experience. My family has enjoyed it. My kids have loved just the journey of it. And so it was great because we moved right when the pandemic hit. So it's been really nice to meet our neighbors in a way we've never met them before. And so it's been great to be part of the community.
How much campaigning did you do? Tell us about your campaign.
I did a lot of social media and a lot of bigger events. I'm stay-at-home mom with my kids, so I did a few canvassing without much exposure as other candidates did, but I was able to get out and just talk to people.
Any questions for Nakuma?
Sure, yes. So I saw you at the housing forum that was back in October. That was hosted by lots of social service organizations. And so obviously the topic of that forum was housing. It was also about homelessness, which was touched on for part of the time as well. Do you have any more, any points you want to leave us with on those two issues, which of course are big issues on voters' minds?
Like the housing market, that's interesting. Back to over and over again. Now these to be solved in the next few years. I also read recently that we don't have a shelter for the families here. And that's something that counties start working on. We have a lot of families who are in need of that. So it's been nice being able to meet with a lot of the social working programs, like Samaritan's House and CPO, to learn about the issues that we're facing and MTSS. Because I have a better grasp of what's going on in the community that I ran. It was a great opportunity to just, go out there and see what's going on, because I think as a candidate, you get to listen to issues in a different way. People open up to you in a way you won't, in the grocery store with somebody, than if you would just be being high. And so I was able to connect with them, and I really enjoyed it.
Is there a specific interaction with a voter that stands out to you, something that you'll remember years from now?
Actually, one of Nathan Barney's students, he was walking me out, and I asked him, I think one of his classes was very interactive. He mentioned that I talked to his kids and that posed with them, and he was really, it made him seem like politics was something he'd get into eventually. So it was really nice to see that our impact as candidates go beyond just winning and losing. We're actually impacting every day. It's really experience you finally realize that sometimes as a candidate you talk to people, you don't realize that you're impacting their lives. So that was the first time I figured out validation of what I was actually doing.
Yeah, great. Jason, you have a question?
Any questions for Nakuma?
Hey,
Jason?
Nakuma, how are you?
Good to you?
Good to see you again. So my compliments go out to all 4 Senate candidates. You all came into MVU to talk to our kids. And I think we were lucky to have some of the big fish, the statewide candidates come in as well. So I was young once, and when I ran for the legislature, I was 21 years old.
Youngest legislator at the time,
At the
Jason?
time, yep. You're 34. Can you talk about your experience running as a relatively young person and whether or not you think that helped or hurt you?
I actually think, well, it depends on what the demographic you're looking at. And I think if you're under 45, it was a big thing. It was awesome. It was great. You understand what I'm going through, where you have family, you have your kids. We're facing a lot of the issues they're facing, student loan debt, high cost of living, childcare. But I believe everybody above 45, even above, saw me as a child. Instead of seeing the experience I have. I've lived in 3 different states because of my husband's job or military long family. So I've done a lot of it on my own, not being my family. And so my experience is very different than most people. And so I feel like I bring something different to the plate than my counters. And because I have a different life experience, I don't think I always get the reception I thought I would get because of the age differences. And they just see me as one of their children instead of seeing me as a person with experience.
Were you able to go out to the polls at all today and do a little sign waving?
Yeah, I was at city for a few hours, and then I went to Swanton and town. I have to pay mom in the afternoon for my kids, so.
Do you think this is something that you'll try again in the future, or is it just something you're going to think about?
So I was actually interested. I spoke to my sister about this, and we always talk about how the first time you do something, you need to try again. And he told me, he's like, even if you don't win, you need to try again. And so I think it's something we might discuss in the future and see if we can do again.
All right, thank you very much. Any other questions?
No.
I think we're good. Nakuma, thank you very much. Congratulations on a solid campaign. Good of you to put yourself out there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Good evening. Bye-bye.
We'll see you. Bridget, I'm seeing numbers on the Josh Aldrich, Kelly Goslin, Jay Sweeney that are catching my attention. This is, of course, a race for Franklin County Assistant Judge, 2 positions. And I think the numbers, is Josh Aldrich ahead with the numbers you have?
He is, yes.
Wow.
1,858. But it's close between all 3. Jay Sweeney in 2nd and Kelly Fitzgerald Goslin in 3rd.
And again, we don't have St. Albans, or at least St. Albans City with that.
No, don't have either.
But that's interesting. Hey, Jason, you're taking note of Mark Lauer's, certainly pretty solid write-in campaign for sheriff.
Yeah.
You might not be aware of it, but Josh Aldrich ended up being one of these 3 candidates by 1 vote. He ran as a write-in candidate in the primary. Kelly Goslin, the incumbent assistant judge, won the Democratic nomination. Jay Sweeney running as a Republican, won the Republican nomination. But Joshua Aldrich got enough write-in votes to beat Kelly Goslin by 1 vote with Republican write-in. So he got the Republican nomination by basically one or 2 votes. And now he's actually turning in a pretty solid effort. I interviewed all 3 candidates. I know he's worked very hard. I see his signs all over the place. Mm-hmm. He told me, this was quite a while ago, that he'd spent about $10,000. But again, I had the incumbent Kelly Goslin and Jay Sweeney, longtime member of the Sheriff's Department, in pretty good shape in that race. So we'll see. It's a lot of numbers to go, but that's certainly a pretty impressive showing at this point by Mr. Aldrich.
Right. We do have some more numbers from Georgia now.
Yeah.
And so, yes, Ashley Bartley was correct in saying that she and Carolyn Brannigan will go to Montpelier.
Okay.
The 2 of them have secured Georgia's vote in that district as well.
What about probate judge? Again, interesting race to me that I talked about a little before. The incumbent judge Yvonne Como and challenger Bob Farrar. What are you showing for numbers there? Anything of note? And again, this is a rematch from 4 years ago, which was a very close race 4 years ago.
Okay. I don't think we have those results.
So don't see anything for probate.
No, not at this time.
Okay. I'm trying to think what else, anything else we haven't touched on here. How are your kids, the MVU students, Jason, were they taking much known? Are they into these elections?
Some of them are.
Of course, it's a midterm. It's not a presidential election, but,
Right.
but some of them.
I think the students appreciate our effort as teachers to try to bring the candidates in.
Yeah.
And some of the students have some political knowledge of the political parties and candidates that they enjoy, candidates that they want to support. I wish that I had the numbers from MVU's mock election to give to you, but
really?
because I think there were some write-in votes for that too.
And what elections did they do in the mock election?
All of the statewide candidates.
Statewide.
And in the past, we've done some of the local elections, but we didn't do the local elections for this one. One issue that MVU students were particularly interested in, and this is the boat has already sailed on this, is the cannabis legalization issue. And personally, I don't think a student speaking up on that issue is an indication that they use one way or the other. But I think there is just this conversation about whether or not we as a society want to have our law enforcement officials busting people for marijuana possession anymore. So there was some interest on that, and the candidates were all great responding to those questions. And most of the candidates that we heard from, including Joe Benning for lieutenant governor, were supportive of the idea of taking it to the voters and letting individual towns decide whether or not they would have dispensaries in their locations. So we have a couple in Franklin County. I believe St. Albans Town said yes. Swanton said yes. Alberg, a couple of other towns. So on some level, though, it's almost funny to me to see my students' reaction to that issue, because
Are they confident do they talk openly about that? Is there any trepidation on their part to not say too much to their teacher or an adult or something, or not?
Well, no, I think it's been part of the black market for so long. And they have had older brothers and sisters go to college and maybe talk about use, that the end of the prohibition of marijuana and the discussion of it being legal is now just something that they probably thought was going to happen at some point anyway. I can remember working with Dave Zuckerman as a young Republican and Zuck as a progressive 25 years ago when the issue was medical marijuana. And personally, I think society's moving in the right direction on this one. I know my mom agrees or disagrees, but I'm glad to see that we're not going to ask our police to bust somebody for marijuana possession anymore.
Yeah. We're going to take a short break right now, but we'll be back with more election night 2022 coverage. Again, I'm Richard Coverthwaite from Northwest Access TV with Jason Barney and Bridget Igdon. We shall return. And good evening again, everyone. Richard Cowperthwaite for Northwest Access TV, Election Night 2022. And we're in our last segment here. And again, very happy to have alongside Bridget Higdon, the managing editor of the St. Albans Messenger, and Jason Barney, MVU teacher, former legislator, author, you name it. Thanks, folks, for your fine company tonight. Still hoping to get some more numbers out there. A couple local issues, or at least one in Fairfax, a school renovation issue. Bridget at BFA Fairfax, and that
Yes.
had a few bucks with it, correct?
Right, yes, they've got $36 million.
Wow, that's
on
pretty
the ballot.
serious hit.
Sure, this is the third time in 8 years that they've put this issue on the ballot. It's been defeated twice previously.
No, really hoping the third time will be the charm for these
Yes,
folks. huh?
hopefully so.
Wow.
But I took a tour of the school a couple weeks ago with all of the principals, actually, and they sort of showed me what needs work and why what they currently have is not working. Fairfax is one of the fastest growing towns in Franklin County and the state, really. So its elementary school is pretty much bursting at the seams. So they're looking to build kindergarten classrooms, update all of their science laboratories, because a lot of them right now don't have sinks or don't have gas extension or don't have a proper number of outlets, so it's sort of limiting what they can do curriculum-wise. They're looking to expand the band room and chorus, so lots of different departments are getting attention. But yeah, we'll see what happens this time around. $36 million is a big ask. It'd be adding more than $500 to some people's annual taxes, especially for retirees or folks who don't have kids in schools. That's can be tough.
Interesting. That's, of course, a huge issue in Burlington. $165 million bond issue for a new Burlington high school.
Sure.
Which sounds like the Queen City could really use, but just seeing some of the media coverage of that, boy, it's a pretty good hit for taxes for that big a bond. That'll be,
Right.
I'll be interested to see how that comes out.
Yeah, especially interesting in Fairfax with this vote is that it was not, the question is not on the ballot that was mailed by the
Really?
state in October. It didn't meet the deadline. So folks either had to vote in person today or they had to request a separate ballot from the town clerk. So I think that probably caused some confusion, and we'll see how that ends up with their turnout numbers. But when I went to Fairfax today to the poll, it was definitely both sides. I spoke to folks who were against it, who also were confused. They didn't understand sort of the education behind it and thought the school district had done a poor job sort of explaining the issue, versus some people who were super confident that, yes, this has to happen. We have to do it for our kids and for our growing community. So, yeah, we'll have to see probably tomorrow which way that issue goes.
Interesting. Franklin Senate District, any new numbers? Again, it appears the two Republicans appear to be in pretty good shape. Incumbent Senator Randy Brock of Swanton and Representative Bob Norris of Sheldon hoping to move from the House to the Senate. They've got a pretty good lead over Democrats, Pam McCarthy and Nakuma Palczewski.
They do a very solid lead. There's
Yeah.
no new numbers at this time, but Randy and Robert are both over 2,000, and the others are far behind.
Okay, I mean, a lot of numbers to go there, certainly not
Sure, we
officially.
still have all of St. Albans to come in, all of
Yeah.
Swanton, and then some of the smaller towns as well. Fairfax.
Interesting. Yeah, but it certainly seems like the two Republicans are in pretty good shape.
Yes.
Again, the alternate universe of Franklin County, again, at this point, one of the 13 members, only one is a Democrat, Mike McCarthy of St. Albans City, and we don't have the results from his House race, which I certainly expected to be a close race with Republican Joe Luno, but at this point, Mike McCarthy, the one Democrat in the 13-member delegation. And boy, we're not going to be talking a lot of Democrats. Conceivably, no Democrats, no more than one or two. Again, what's the story, Jason? You know Franklin County pretty well. It's again a parallel universe up here. It's a Democratic-dominated state, and Franklin County is just a very different world, as is kind of the Northeast Kingdom to some extent too.
Yeah. So I think it's a little bit of a shift that started to happen way back when I was in the legislature. And maybe even saying a shift is a poor way to describe it. But the Democrats who I served with, Ron Allard and Jim Ouellette and some of the others.
And Francis Horrigan comes to mind, good,
Yeah.
solid conservative Democrats.
At the time, they would have been, and it was in the press quite a bit at the time as well, what they would call the blue dog Democrats, people who would vote with the Republicans every once in a while. And I think if if you take a look at the numbers, the Franklin County Senate seats have been Republican for a long, long time. I know my former seat has been held by Republicans. The Swanton seats have been held by Republicans. And I know sitting here at 9:53 on election night with not as many numbers as we would like, that's kind of a sign of the times. Where in the past, you and I have been doing this for, I think, 5 or 6 elections, and you've been doing this a lot longer than I have. When there weren't as many mail-in ballots, we would know the results an hour or two after the polls closed. But we're in a situation now, with so many write-in ballots and so many mail-in ballots to be counted, where we're approaching 10 o'clock, and I don't even think we have half the towns reporting yet. So
yeah, and again, as you mentioned, the write-in situation for the sheriff's race is certainly clearly slowing things down. So again, it seems the 2 Republicans running for Senate, Randy Brock and Bob Norris, appear to be headed for election. Again, House races, James Gregoire, the Fairfield Republican state rep from Fairfield, appears he's got re-election over Brenda Churchill of Bakersfield. Again, we have the Enosburg numbers, and I'm certainly going to say Alan Penny DeMar will be the new rep from succeeding Felicia Leffler. We don't have Montgomery numbers. They're not about to change that significantly.
Right.
Again, Franklin won, Carolyn Brannigan of Georgia and Ashley Bartley of Fairfax, the 2 Republican candidates. Winner 0 over Democrats Al Maynard of Fairfax and Devin Thomas of Georgia. And we have partial numbers in Franklin 8, Casey Toof. In the partial numbers we have a sizable lead over Lauren Dees-Erickson, the Democrat in that race. Casey, the incumbent Republican, don't have final numbers there, and unfortunately don't have any numbers for the Mike McCarthy, Joe Luno race. And again, the interest to me, the Franklin County Assistant Judge, that looks like a real race now with a lot of numbers to go with Josh Aldrich, Kelly Goslin, the incumbent, and Jay Sweeney. But it sounds like may need to see just about all the towns to nail that down.
Yes.
And probate judge, we had nothing of much note for the Como-Farrar race. I guess we did have some.
Just that Farrar has a marginal lead at this time.
Farrar was ahead.
Yes. And we'll see maybe whether the city's votes seal that deal for him or not.
Okay. And state's attorney, again, John Lavoie and Zach Waite. We got
That's
much
close
there.
as well. We've got 1,800 for Waite and 17 for Lavoie.
Whereas in very, very close.
It is close at this time, yeah.
Wow, that's interesting. I had John Lavoie. I thought he would, I certainly had him the favorite in that race for what little that's worth. Zach Wade, not nearly as well known from Milton outside the county. I guess he's been trying to get a house in the county. Of course, for John Lavoie, I guess that a well-known name can go both ways, being a prosecutor. Anyway, we're down to a few, I guess that's about what we can wrap up race-wise. Jason, kind of getting close to wrap-up comments here.
Yeah.
Again, anything kind of jumping out at you about this particular election?
So when you have the political bug, it's always difficult to get rid of that sort of thing. So I put myself in the situation, if I were running, what were some of the things that I would have been talking about? And I think we saw 2 issues, or at least in my mind, there were 2 issues that I would love to have had some sort of polling about or gotten some of the internal numbers as to how voters thought. And I think we saw the results of one of those. In your interview with Casey Toof, he mentioned that he had changed his view on the abortion issue.
Which we should have talked about before, right? Proposal 5, Article 22, a big issue statewide.
Right.
And right, he voted against it in the legislature, now says he supports it.
Right. And I'm not going to criticize him for that because I think that shows the evolution of a candidate, and he should be applauded. I know when I was in the legislature, I was a young conservative as well. And Vermont is a more liberal place, and I think that he's probably trying to reflect the view of a lot of his voters. The other issue that on some level boggles my mind, on another issue I would love to have conversations with some of the elected Republicans. Some of these local races have been nationalized based on the election denial comments by the former president. And as a former Republican, I'm just curious as to, because the county now is very heavily Republican, I'm just curious.
But are you saying you think that issue has really played into some of these local races?
I'm not sure it has, but I just hope elected Republicans, if they were in a situation where they had to make a decision where the outcome of an election hinged on somebody's election denial claims, that they would not do what's happening in Arizona, that they would not do what's happening in other locations. So tonight we only got the opportunity to interview Ashley Bartley, and she was clear. She said the presidential election's over, it's happened, we have to move on. We didn't get the chance to ask that to Matt Walker, but I would have wanted to see their reactions and hear their responses to some of those questions, because as a former Republican, I've had it with the former president and his claims, and I think the Republican Party needs to move beyond it.
Interesting. Well, the governor, Phil Scott, seemingly headed for a big re-election victory, as certainly is no fan of Mr. Trump. He's made that pretty clear.
Yeah.
Anyway, Bridget, down to, boy, last minute, some final thoughts on election 2022 here in Franklin County?
Yeah, well, back to the Proposition 5 question.
Yeah.
That has been called as being passed by Vermont Digger, saying that, we'll enshrine it in our Constitution and be one of the first states to do so. And so I think, personally, that's exciting for this state, I will say. I think it was not unexpected, but there had been some folks who were skeptical about the language of the bill and sort of how it was written and what it would mean. So we'll see how Franklin County voted on that issue. I think that'll be interesting to see tomorrow and in the days ahead. But overall, I think a lot of these races went the way we thought they would. There haven't been any big surprises yet. But yeah, overall, I'm really, it's exciting for me as a young woman who's leading a fairly large newspaper, if you will allow me to say, to get the chance to interview a lot of these candidates and talk about big issues and think about what they mean for our state. And to have the opportunity for me to, I interviewed Becca Ballant months ago, and for me to be able to interview her and say, I was a young female journalist who interviewed our first
the first one we're going to finally send to Congress.
Yeah, that's exciting, and I think it shows about where the state is moving and our potential for the future. So,
okay, we'll call it a night right there. Many thanks, Bridget Higdon, the managing editor of the St. Albans Messenger. Thank you very much, Bridget. Great to see you. Thanks for your expertise.
Sure, thanks for having me.
Jason Barney, MVU teacher, author, former legislator. Always good to have you on board, Jason. Thank you very much. And again, our key guys behind the scenes, Josh here in front of us, the rest of the gang. In back, Paul Allen and Katie, and thanks to the town clerks, ballot clerks who helped us get the numbers we did get. Again, thank you very much for watching us here on Northwest Access TV. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next time. I'm Richard Copperthwaite. See ya.